Are we able to see if anybody's actually watching on YouTube when it comes in?
Probably.
So as one who watches them on YouTube, say how many other people are
Are
watching
we able
it.
to see if anybody's actually?
I'm muting it, so there you go. It usually will say,
Let's say like 3 people are watching or something. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
For an audience.
Taped in front of a live.
All right, so we are live. I'm just having this so we can do the PowerPoint when we're doing that. Okay,
We're live?
you're live.
All right, welcome everybody. And this is the Construction and Labor Committee. And it's March 11th, 2025. And I would note that Greg Mezzi had a conflict. He's one of the members of this committee, but he's unable to attend. And because we are streaming, I would take just a moment to do introductions. So if you want to start around the room, my name is Rich John. I'm the chair of the Construction Labor Committee, and I am also on the Tompkins County Legislature.
Todd Burr. I'm on the IDA committee and represent local labor.
Nels Bone, the Director of Community Development for the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency.
I am Ina Arthur. I work for IAED and I'm minutes and dealing with various Zoom things.
Kurt Anderson, work for IED. I also work on the local labor data on the backside.
Heather McDaniel, President, Ithaca Area Economic Development and Co-Administrative Director for the IDA.
Kelly Bauda, Co-Administrative Director of the IDA and Director of Business Services at IAED.
Okay. And our first item of business involves some changes to our policy in how we track local labor reporting on projects. And we have been doing it internally. We are going to a different system. And I'd ask Kurt if you could give us just a brief update on what we're doing.
Yep, sure. So the labor policy as it's written, the revised version adopted in December of 2021, really is managed in-house. So we collect the information, the notifications, the data from the general contractor who's reporting on behalf of all the subs. As there have been more projects coming through the IDA, the volume of regulatory compliance and the data that comes in is becoming much, much larger. Through a series of meetings across the state, developed a relationship with the third-party contractor who works with other IDAs, which I don't know what the folks on the video have seen or not, but the outfit is Loki Brill, located in Rochester. In striking up a relationship with them, you obviously all in late fall of 2024 approved using them for local labor. The issue that we're hoping to resolve today and the track changes that you see in front of you are our policy and the requirements per that policy vary from what Loki Brill requires of their clients, customers, and subcontractors. So it would not be fair for us to put in front of a developer, largely in front of a general contractor, and say, here's our rules. And by the way, you got to follow the rules of Loki Brill as well, right? It would be, having done this side-by-side comparison, it'd be very confusing. So knowing that you all approved and we at some point will move to Loki Brill, what I have tried to capture here in the document in front of you is adapting our policy to reflect the documents that the contractors and subcontractors will get from Loki Brill. So it's largely not substantive, and I'll go through kind of the 3 overarching points here that are enumerated in the memo that you have. One, in the current policy, we refer to the catchment area as Tompkins +6. However, the way the code was written and how data is reported to us, it bleeds over a little bit here and there. Don't ask me where, but Loki Brill actually shows up at the job site since taking pictures of everybody's driver's licenses. So they actually cross-reference the city of, because that's how we track local labor. Let me back up a step. It's the residence of the worker, not where the contractor is located, but where the worker is located.
We're doing that by zip code, correct?
Currently, we do that, right, in our data tracking. So number 1 here is just refining the catchment area to remove from the current policy any reference to zip code analysis, because that's not what Loki Brill would use going forward, okay? Number two, we currently require monthly labor reporting that's submitted 60 days from the month it was recorded. So I give an example in here that labor for December would be due to me by March 1st from any subcontractor that was working on the site for that month. Loki Brill actually provides, they require that the Monday after the previous work week. And the reason being, he said, look, the payroll people, the people who worked want to get paid. The payroll people are accumulating those records weekly. Why shouldn't you have them weekly as well? Now that would require a lot of work on our end to track those things down in addition to our other responsibilities. This is what they do, right? So the change made, instead of requiring labor reports 60 days after they're due on the Monday after the week the labor was performed. So it's going to ideally offer a more real-time view into what's happening and to identify those folks who are non-compliant. And I think actually give you a closer real-time view of end of project, right? So it's difficult for me to report on how a project's doing when I'm 2 months delayed in all that reporting. So that's the second major change. And the third one, when we revised the policy in 2021, which we'll talk about in the presentation, we set 15 days for administrative waiver and 30 days for board review in the policy as it's written. And the proposed change is to amend that to 45 days. And the reasoning behind that for Loki Brill is like, look, we don't know exactly when we're going to get that request. This gives us more opportunity to, if it needs to be elevated to the board level, that we've got more time to do that instead of it hit that narrow window and now it's good. The waiver is already automatically blessed. So again, the changes that are redlined in here and that are outlined in this memorandum are only in adapting our policy and the documents to match theirs. The actual person the outfit Loki Brill that's going to be doing the reporting. And I will just point out at the very end there in that last paragraph, they do as part of their contractual services require all the insurance certificates. So you see it written there, commercial general liability, the auto coverage. That's not just for companies, but you, Nels, show up on a job site. We want proof of your auto insurance coverage as well. That is not something our policy requires, nor is it written in there. And when asked, like, do we need to do that? They said, you don't, but it doesn't reduce your cost. So it's kind of one of those, if you want to do it, we could have it. Who knows if we need it in the future? That's up to you, right? I'm really proposing the main three changes, which is the catchment area, the reporting timeline, and the waiver timeline. But this is something for you to consider as well.
And I would just add, Loki Brill does this for several IDAs, and this is how they do it. Like, I know we like to be different here, but for ease of their processes to align with the way they do it for the more than 20 other IDAs, I think probably makes better sense than them asking them to fit us into a square peg into a round hole.
We are special, but we don't need to be special in that way.
I'm just trying to think how OSHA, when they come on job sites, I'm just afraid that, it might be I can see some people being, I want to see your driver's license. I want to see this. It might be, might get a little.
Well, they do it for all kinds of other IDAs.
I wonder if it's not, and this might be a good question, as to if they don't kind of solicit that on the front end, right? Like, hey, contractor X, give me a list of who everybody's there. Can you give me all the, I'd like to think, but I could clarify that they're not just showing up and busting the door down and saying, let me see your IDs, right? That they've tried to collect all that. And then when they show up on site, they're verifying that those people.
Because the payroll report would be the big thing to see, that could be paying somebody 40 hours a week not to be there. So that'd be the big thing with you.
Have we gotten any feedback from general contractors or developers that have worked in this system to say, yeah, it works?
No, no, we haven't.
No, we talked to the IDAs.
Okay.
The IDAs said it works.
So indirectly, we haven't heard anybody complaining bitterly that this is.
And if they have the IDAs or Loki Brill have not told us that that's the case.
It seems like this is a painless way to do it if it's just a component of what's already collected for payroll. Should be pretty straightforward, and payroll would have all of that information on address, for the people that are working. So it seems rational to me, but
Two quick questions. Does Loki Brill's reports are they easy to read and understand when you receive them? Have you seen any?
So I've seen the templates not filled with data, right? And so I was a little the concern, the version that I got was a PDF. I said, you don't possibly. Having gone through, when I started in 2020, gone through the piles of printed reports and accumulated those, I said, no, we have an electronic version that we collect from. So no, it makes total sense. Really, they're doing the same thing, and a way that works for them is recording presence, absence of workers on particular days.
Okay. And then the second question I had was in terms of the waiver, it says it must be submitted 45 days in advance. You think that is there, what if somebody's at 44 days? I mean, should they know 45 days in advance? Is that an easy thing to do? Or is that a hard and fast rule that if you're going to seek a waiver, it's got to be received 45 days in advance of hiring that?
Needing it.
Contract's already approved and everything.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that your
Require them
experience
to
that
plan
the waiver
ahead.
can come in early enough? They can plan for that?
It depends on the.
Yeah, the general contractor.
Certainly if it's one of those trades that's not available locally.
I think it does two things for us. I'll speak from our side of the house is it forces the general contractor to think further ahead. Right. Though best intentions with the policies written now with a 2-week administrative review, there are weeks where Heather's gone for substantial portions, and it really, we've kind of hamstrung ourselves by keeping that window narrow like that. And I think that it benefits the general contractor to say, well, it's a much narrower window and it's a quicker timeline. I think moving it to 45 days makes everybody stop and think about what they're doing, and even may affect the in a positive way, I think, the use of local labor. If no, we're not rushing this through, we're going to think about who you bid to and have conversations with those folks instead of being under the gun.
I know because just a couple examples, a couple developers. I guess I mentioned Ted Fax, with Vision Day. I know you won't see Welliver do another one of their jobs. That job below with Cacalers that they had, Pleasant Valley. I know they got stung too. A local contractor in town, they got stung on that job there. Because they weren't paying them timely. And I think there were some other ones too that got stung on there. I don't know if there was IDA money involved with that one or not, but I'm just trying to save a way just to keep them on, because they turn around and say they couldn't find any local labor. I couldn't find a local GC to handle this. Or because you just burnt the bridges on a guy that has local manpower here, they won't bid to you anymore.
A waiver could move faster than 45 days, right? But it gives us time to maybe, whereas I'm not saying that we would do this for Loki Brill, but it gives us the opportunity if we wanted to call around and say, were you asked? How did this go? Were you the contractor the local that wasn't selected? Or it just makes everybody think a little bit more instead of saying, let's just hurry up and do it. And I am conscious of the fact that time is money on these projects, but we should also be thinking out ahead of time. And I think it probably would improve our relationship with the different entities, the outfits and the contractors around here, if we were having those conversations with them.
Yeah, I think that 45 days gives us the time to say, okay, we're going to look at the bid list. You solicited bids from these 4 local subs. We're going to call the subs and say, why didn't you bid?
And it might give us more information too, that it may not affect that waiver, but it certainly is powerful in our hands of, okay, now we're understanding the process and the relationships a little better than we do now. And again, it's consistent with what they do elsewhere, seemingly to no.
That's their
effect.
Same standard.
That's right. Yeah, this is just changing our policy to match their documents and their reporting requirements that they'll take care of.
yeah, I'm wondering if we could put some language in that says 45 days, but we could process it faster than that. But I'm not quite sure how to phrase that. To guarantee review or.
At least
And them 45 days, but we could handle it. If everything's here, if we could deal with it quick, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe to guarantee timely review.
Yeah.
I don't know. You don't want to hold up
And
projects.
Gonna ask for a mile.
Yeah.
If you put the language in there, every single one is gonna ask you to review it in a short timeline.
You get in a jam.
I mean, yeah, we're gonna do our, depending on when Loki Brill gives us information and makes recommendations to us. I mean, we're not gonna unduly sit on it, but I think it's important to have, a standard amount in there.
Yeah, it might be fine the way it is. Okay. Any further questions, comments on the policy change requests?
So that means the waiver is gonna be so it's not gonna be an automatic waiver anymore then, as far as like if a developer just says something.
No, there's an automatic waiver, right? But it's just takes, it's 45 days.
It's a much longer window to get to that sweet spot. Yeah, right.
So you have time to be able to reach out, okay?
And I will say, we have never yet, there's never been they call it a pocket veto, but there's never been a pocket authorization. We've always gotten to it, but there have been times where it's running close.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm okay with this. I think if it doesn't work, we can change it again.
Just curious, but I'm just wondering, because I know I keep bringing up the stuff about some of these guys not paying their GC subs timely. That's why they reach out to other people. If we had something about if you were have you ever had any liens against you for late payments to your subs or vendors? Is there something you think we could do there to
So I think
put pressure on the bad actors?
in that case, that's something that we can address at a later time. For right now, we just wanted to get these changes implemented so we can go ahead and begin the work with Loki Brill.
I mean, like
And
I'm
then-
asking for a waiver. If they have a bad reputation,
We recently posed that question I'm trying to remember who it was, but a noteworthy actor. And they're like, of course we've had a lien against us at some point in the past. I mean, this is a good, I don't have the exact example and I'm not trying to hide it from you, but this is a very good actor. It's like, well, I would have to answer yes to that question, right? But
I think I'm gonna reiterate what Kelly said, in the interest of aligning with Loki Brill's requirements so that we can get this policy, get them up and moving. We'd like to make changes at this point, and then that bigger review of the policy and discussion about recommended modifications can move along. But again, like, we can't hire Loki Brill to start doing this work when what they do conflicts with what our policy says.
And I guess I'm struggling with the timing in that we as an IDA, we make a point in time decision saying we approve this project or we don't. And we may not know who the general contractors are at that point. We know who the developer is, the owner, but we might not really understand all the parties involved. And if that's the case, how would we go in later, say that's not a GC that we like?
I just had a meeting today and I just learned, like, when I was talking about that one solar company that was having trouble, turns out they're not being paid by the owner. So the owner, sometimes they get these bad owners and they're not paying the
That we
developers,
can consider, and we've talked about that in our assessment of the project, saying, does it work financially, but also, is this an owner who's been responsible?
That'd be great.
I mean, and I think that's fair game, that if somebody has really abused local labor, that's a basis for an IDA member to say, yeah, we don't want to approve this project.
Okay.
But getting involved in the bidding process seems like way beyond our capabilities and our ability to, we would be interfering in that contracting process way more than I think we'd have the capability to do.
Okay.
I don't know, but argue with me, but that's where I'm thinking about it.
It'd be nice if we had somebody where they gotta check that box, we could hold them to it, as far as if they if they were bad actors, and defaulted and didn't, because sometimes they do it because, well, college town job, there's no IDA money, but their job shut down 4 or 5 times because of non-payment. And some people were like $4 million, $2 million, and everybody was off-site and then they.
Well, the owner there is in pretty deep
Yeah.
trouble. I'm sure he would have much rather paid his
Yeah.
fees and completed his project.
Maybe in the interest of moving the agenda along, we could pause this discussion under number 5, current policy, what's working, opportunities.
Yeah, we'll come back to it then.
Okay,
Yeah. So next,
thank you.
is there more on number 2, policy amendment? I think we've talked through those. We okay with them?
I would have a motion. Do you want a motion first?
Recommend changes.
Motion to recommend, adopt or recommend, local labor utilization policy revisions as presented.
Okay. Todd, do you want a second?
Sure.
Okay. Further discussion?
Just point of clarity, did you? Maybe you don't have to decide right now. Do you want the certificates collected or not? You can tell me by the time they start working, really. If it's insurance certificates,
Is it in the policy?
it's in the memo, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about the policy.
We've moved
Yeah.
changes to the,
Policy, good.
Yeah. So this is the policy. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Great. Progress. All right. So then we can proceed to number 3, stakeholder engagement. Kelly?
Yes.
sorry, was there something in your memo that's not reflected in the policy that you were recommending?
I didn't recommend anything, but we need to require in the policy that they provide all these insurance coverages. Loki Brill will collect them. We write it into our policy, otherwise they won't do it.
It's a lot of information. I don't know.
I
that-
don't know why we would collect.
When,
I mean, it's might be in the good to have, but I don't know what we would actually do with it as an IDA.
so Heather, when someone applies for the waiver, Philly, do they have to show, when they talk about insurance, they have to show workers' comp and disability, they have to show that they have that stuff on their workers, or
But
they get 1099 every
the
week?
owner is going to want to see all of that insurance and their counsel will be all over them to check.
So it won't be like 1099.
So I don't know why we would do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So along those lines, we want to take a look at inviting some other members of the construction community to be a part of these conversations on if you want any other amendments done to the policy. So including developers, general contractors and contractors, union representatives, just so that we get a good handle on what's being thought of the policy among that community. So any thoughts on that and how we might want to approach that moving forward?
How about vendors too?
Vendors?
Yeah. Yeah, we got like Allstone in town and
Okay.
Finger Lakes, you know.
So we've done this a couple of ways. The first time around, we had a very large committee. I think this time we've adopted a small committee. And I know there's been some discussion about having different stakeholders come to meetings and just sort of give some feedback. I would recommend you might not want them all in the same room together because you might not get very valuable feedback. But having, an opportunity for the developers to come in and talk about what they think works and doesn't work with the policy. An
Contract.
opportunity for some general contractors, for some, trades representatives.
Or at least invite some in as guests or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I'd thought about it earlier, but if we're going to get developers in here, it might be useful to get some feedback on the entire experience of dealing with the IDA and not just the labor issue, but are the incentives appropriate to their project? Are the asks from the IDA too extreme? Just, is it working? I'd like to, if we're dragging them in here, I'd love to hear them unload on us on everything.
Are you?
Developers, trades, general contractors, vendors, there's 4.
Yeah, I think that would give us a pretty good view of the process and the issues, Todd, that you've raised about liens and payments and timeliness of payments. That would certainly be something we could get information on. Again, I'm wondering, what do we do about it? Because our brief is pretty specific in this process, but I'd be curious to get the feedback.
I'm thinking, I know, like, I'm not sure. I never talked to Dave Brown, the owners of Pleasant Valley to see, 'cause I'm not, I'm not too familiar with them, but I know, I should reach out to them and see what, I'm just curious how much they were owed by, Todd's company there. I'm just curious. I know Welliver was owed quite a bit. I'm just trying to think if there's a way, and I don't know if, but Todd was the owner on that project, right? So he's not paying his GC and his subs. Is there a way?
I assume he's paid by now, right?
I don't know. I just know, I know Welliver's not bidding to him anymore.
Okay.
But no, I'm just saying, is there a way you could, if on applications, and I don't know if it's gonna hurt a project, not because, do you require the owner to post a bond? So if they don't pay the subs, if the subs reach the milestones, so that they're not paid timely, that they have a resource, a recourse, or a way to get paid instead of going through all the legal stuff.
Yeah,
Because they're the ones that employ the local people, whether it's union or non-union. They're the ones that are.
I mean, again, I worry that this is beyond the brief of the IDA, and we do not have police force.
Just requiring a bond?
I mean, what would we would need to perhaps do a legal proceeding to execute on the bond and to, say, yes, you're in default, you need to pay. We would get sued. I mean, this might be something that IURA has more of a.
I know, we'll put some teeth into
The
it.
city has a payment bond requirement when it's the owner for a project, but that's different than when you're assisting a project. We don't require payment bonds for any of our projects. We have had this issue of disclosure of information. We ask people to disclose pending lawsuits. We don't ask about liens because, like you said, a lot of people have liens and there's oftentimes arguments about why there's a lien. It's not always just from one side, but it is. So we've been focusing on lawsuits only as disclosure and take that in as information at the front of the project. And then you're dealing with LLCs, of course, too. So that 815 South Aurora Street project is not Vism, it's an LLC that's the owner. So you got that issue to work through too. So I think at the beginning of the project is a better place to think about those issues. And payment bond, I think, would be very difficult to figure out how to work it from an entity that's providing some assistance, but not the owner.
It's tough because most of the time they'll pass that burden on to the.
Yeah, no, I know.
DCs
There's some
and
issues
stuff
there.
anyway. Yeah, so I don't know how much it hurts, yeah. Just trying to come up with something, but.
So stakeholder engagement, any other
Maybe that's
groups we might want to engage?
You've got local government here already. We're covered on that one.
Yep.
No, I think that would give us a nice view of the spectrum of parties that are involved. I mean, we could get general community members, but I don't know that they would offer a lot of useful input on how did the project work for them, because they're not involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Move on to the data.
Yeah, data analysis. Kurt, back to you.
You want me to pop up the PowerPoint?
Go for it.
See if I can get that one up. All right, let me make it look nicer.
Go up to the top and go view.
Hello. Okay, there we go. All right, that's subtitles, but just let me know when you want to move on.
It's really helpful for subtitles, but all right. Well, it's been a couple of years since we've really looked at some dates and a lot more projects than we had previously. So Going to go through a few things that are time permitting. I'm sure the data would have a lot more information, but I hope this gives you a good look at where we're at and the efficacy of our policy. So I'm going to hit it. We're gonna start with kind of oh, I see. We used the old presentation. That'll do. We're gonna compare it. In April of 2016, the IDA established a local labor utilization policy. Okay, it was the first framework that we'd had along those lines. That policy.
Sorry.
That as our catchment area, Tompkins +6, but at the time, the documents that we use are written, it was a zip code analysis. So it did bleed over a little bit, and that was referenced in the original policy. It did require bid lists from our GC. So I needed the bid package and the bid list. And what I now, again, we're using an old, I put no local justification. What that means is, if you didn't solicit a local bid, I need you, in addition to the bid package and the bid list, I need you to give me a written explanation of why you didn't do that. Either you don't have relationships with those folks or they don't exist. In case of elevator, right? I need a written explanation for each type of work from which you did not solicit a local bid. And then monthly labor reporting, right? So every month that's one body is on there for 1 hour from any sub, I need that report. Okay. And so for years they were accumulated, printed and filed. I started in 2020 and hey, new guy, since you're headed home for COVID anyway, here it is. Right. So me, my handy TI-83 and I got to work. We looked at a lot of data. I'll reference a little bit some of the older data in a few slides, but ultimately that information, that analysis conducted in late 2020, but then discussed as a product of this community through 2021, we adopted the new policy that is in front of you with the changes to fit Loki Brill, but it gives you a bigger picture. The changes are the ones in boldface. So everything stays the same except we now require a certified mail notification to the head of the Tompkins Cortland Building Trades Council, which in this case is Todd Brewer. The idea with that was that as soon as it received approval, that they would give notification to the Building Trades Council, and the Building Trades Council could then talk to their friends and say, hey, project got approved, heads up. You know, like Todd doesn't necessarily, he's a member of the IDA, but Todd won't always be in that role, but they'll get a notification quickly. And then they can spread the word. They don't have to go to the meeting to know that the project is alive and well and received its incentives. Actually, I have most of this in front of me. We set a 75% local labor threshold. We knew that was ambitious at that time. The data that we looked at indicated we were roughly in the 1/3 mark, the 33% to 40% range. There was some conversation at the time. I recall Ann Corman talking about this to bump that threshold to 67%. We're like, well, if we're setting an ambitious goal, we might as well set it at 75 and see where it's at. And we're going to go through some of those numbers in a second, but we did set a threshold. And with that threshold, realizing that it was ambitious, we set up a process whereby contractors could request, the general contractor could request waivers for certain types of work, which again, we'll go through in a second. And then there's one exemption, just to be clear, for affordable housing projects. Those projects that are 75% or more units set aside for 80% AMI or less. So we went from just requiring largely the monthly reports to we're now setting a threshold and actually using that to guide our policy. And as you've seen, we're coming around, we're rejiggering. This is an iterative process a couple of years later. Next slide, I know.
I think it's sort of important to note that that first policy was really aimed at gathering information because we had a really large committee. We heard from a lot of people, and there was a lot of questions as to whether there were subcontractors that had capacity to bid on these larger jobs. So we decided to be cautious and say, okay, what's possible? What's happening now? And that's why we used that data to inform decisions about the policy that we have now that has that 75% requirement. And I would agree with Kurt based on that old data that, you know, it was a stretch and we said, okay, let's see if we can meet that.
Yeah, so I thought this timeline was helpful for me at least to kind of lay it out there. We as I mentioned, in April of 16, set the new policy. I wasn't here at the time, but yes, it was largely to collect data to inform future revisions. As it pertains to local labor policy, it's by date of approval, right? So some projects might get approved but they take years to come to fruition. I'd say many of them do. But as from the time of that first policy, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 projects that have been approved under the auspices of the previous local labor policy. Those projects, they gave me their bid list, they gave me justifications, and more importantly, they gave me monthly data, right? That we tack on to the projects that came before it. So we've got those projects. We've only, since we revised the policy in December of 21, so obviously COVID was an issue slowing things down. The interest rate environment slowed that down. We've had one project come through since having to meet the new policy requirements, the 75% threshold.
Fully completed, you mean?
Yes. I will caveat that the dean was a little weird that when they did their bidding the first time, it was before they had come to the IDA and they had agreed on some contracts. Then the interest rate climate changed. They came to the IDA for incentives, got approval under the new revised policy, but still had some contractual obligations from before. So it's not a perfect before and after example, but it'll be good enough for our purposes today. Next slide, Anna. Give you a second to digest this. And these are those same 10 projects the dean kind of called out, carried through as a little different. But these are the same 10 projects, but this time arranged in order of total project cost, okay, which you'll see in parentheses there in millions. The lower the cost to the left, the higher cost projects to the right. Okay, I'm gonna hit the space bar one more time. And this is what I really want you to see. It seems to be, like, mind you, this is metadata. It's a lot of data, but the more expensive the project, the less local labor is used.
Percentage-wise.
Percentage-wise, as a condition of all trades included, okay?
Herald Square is a bit of an outlier. If you recall, it was paused. They switched general contractors, the new GC came in, and costs went way up on that project. But it was completed with, I think, more local labor than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and any large data set's going to have outliers, and that is certainly one. But the general trend is, again, the more expensive the project, the less data. I can surmise that might be a capacity issue, that they need a lot of bodies or at a certain time that may not be met locally. There may be other reasons for that. I just cut the data and see trends in there. And this is one that I thought would be interesting to you.
Excellent. Oh,
I'll let them think for 1 second, right?
okay.
I don't know that I'm going to we'll have all the questions or all the answers in this meeting, but I want you to see this.
Why is the dean so much lower?
I think my guys are the only ones that were local.
So one note about the dean did request waivers. This is all, so they still have to report. Waivers still have to give me data. I just don't count it in their totals, but I have the data. So when I put all that data together, even the waivers that they had, this is all of it right there.
Okay.
We'll talk about the dean in a second, but. So, all right, next slide, Anna.
Stereo project, that's when I remember Cynthia Brock, 12 at night, asked them that question, if they would, she didn't say local labor, she said prevailing wage. And they said yes, then they turned around and came back and couldn't afford to do local labor.
And some trades, they do.
That's, they got the job.
I think those are interesting questions that you can ask on a project by project basis. I think those conversations that you're talking about with the developer, the general contractor, those will be really interesting because it depends. One thing that I think you're aware of, IED has a workforce development arm of which we're building an industry partnership in the construction trades. I know, Todd, you've been really engaged in that, so I don't have to tell you, but it's called Tompkins Build. the focus is on nine trades.
And now.
That's right.
Right, yep.
It's changing by the
What's,
day.
yeah, what's the one that I'm missing? Sorry. So as I went back to the grants that we report on to the federal government, I saw 9 trades listed. That's what I've got here, but it's good that it's growing. So what I tried to do, and we're looking at the orange graph here, and I'll explain why I included the other ones later, but I went through all 10 of those projects line by line. It's not as simple as doing that by the employer, because a group like Welliver's got masons, carpenters, but they've got many classes. So line by line aggregated data by trade, by group trade, and this is what you see. Okay, on those 10 projects. And that's left to right. Electricians have made out pretty well in descending order to plumbers who have always been behind. And the graph to the left, I'll tell you what that is. The blue, red, and green. That was the original chart we looked at in 2021, I'll say. After the data analysis in 2020, we were looking at what we called the big 3 at that time: carpenters, electricians, and plumbers, pipe fitters. That was the data from the 3 projects that you see listed there: City Center, Herald Square, and Organic Nature. If you add those plus the 7 other projects that have come through the pipe, that you get the orange graph.
PAT?
Painters and allied trades. So glaziers is the big one that comes out of that. Any window treatments. So
Hard to get a plumber. Who knew? Everybody knows.
we knew, yeah, actually we knew, yeah. So this and/or a further dive, I think probably by trade, might help with our workforce initiative on who's ringing there. One other nugget of information that we do glean, if you go to the next slide, Ina. We have almost 200 unique contractors show up through these 10 projects in reports. I just plucked an arbitrary number of all those contractors. I made a table of which projects they showed up in. And so I said, oh, let's see, 3 or more, who are those folks, right? And this is your list right now. Out of almost 200, there's a dozen or so that show up routinely out of 10 projects. Comfort Systems are your plumbers. They're on almost every single project. 7 of 10, they show up.
Are they local?
They're out of Syracuse. Well, they're national, but the local is out of Syracuse.
Not even.
And the plumbers union, they're part of the local plumbers is Syracuse, right?
So UA 81, yeah, they include Syracuse. That I want to make very clear though, that this is all, I have no way to know if they're union or not union. I don't know. I've understood that Comfort largely is not union, but they would be within the union catchment area if those employees chose to join the hall.
So do you know offhand which of these are local, would be considered? Oh, it's local by worker, not by location of subcontractor. Never mind.
Yeah, I could tell you where these folks are located. Todd and his colleagues would know whether those folks, even if they were located in Iowa, if they hired through the local hall, it matters because the employees are there. But just showing you that this data is available, and I have a larger table. Naturally, when you're cutting data, you got a lot of tables and a lot of graphs that I don't want to overwhelm you, but this type of data is informative. And that's why I think even on a project by project basis, it's really interesting because, you know, which ones show up on the projects, you know, the local percentages, they vary by trade, by project. But these are some repeat occurrences, I would say.
Well, that is interesting to me that if there's 200 discrete contractors on IDA projects, we're really talking about a pretty small subset.
Yeah.
That are steady players.
Yeah. And that's actually how I get to know their names. I see these same people over and over again on these projects, right? And I think one of the reasons that you see, what's an interesting point for Todd, that you see the electricians consistently higher than the other big 3 and certainly higher than the other 8 trades in Tompkins Builder 9 now.
I push my guys to bid them.
Well, you got Matco Electric, which hires predominantly, I mean, they're almost always all local, and Schuler Haas. Like those are the ones, if a project is firing with Schuler Haas or Matco on them, I know they're gonna have a higher percentage, just because there's a ton of workers and they're local, right? Comfort Systems, almost rarely are local. Design specialists. So the ones with asterisks, there's 4 projects up there. We're gonna talk about the dean in a second. Those are not located here and they don't hire here. Comfort Systems, design specialists, which, because it doesn't, I wrote that down. Those are painters, alley trades, actually. Purcell, which is out of Watertown, they use a lot of their own carpentry guys for that. And then Sure Temp, which is HVAC, and they're out of Vestal. Right, so they're not far, they're just not here. But those are your big ones that received waivers on the dean. So this type of information is available. More thing, here's some more info for you. So you saw the dean aggregated earlier, 32.4% across all trades. And again, it was kind of a special case because they had done some of the bidding before they came to the IDA for incentives in the county. But you should know that it took 8 waivers to get to 75%, which is our goal. And these are some big ones. Plumbing was Comfort, painting was LA Painting, Sure Temp for HVAC, I forget flooring. Elevators always going to get waived. We don't have elevator workers here, period. But demo and carpentry was Purcell laborers who come out of Watertown largely, right? So it took 8 waivers. So they were hovering with all data included. They were right in the wheelhouse of what, with doing nothing, you end up at 33%. Took 8 waivers to get to 75%. Now, and I will say, it's a fairly small project on the scheme of things. The big boy outside of Asteri, which again is the old policy, so they don't really have to do anything other than report, is Carpenter Park. That thing's Cayuga Park, whatever you call it. Been going on for years, and they're the best reporting team. I'll put it on record. DeMarco's fabulous. Hires tons of bodies, probably 5,000-6,000 lines of data just on their own. 33% consistently in the mid to upper 30s, right? I don't want to say not trying, but just this is a huge data set that shows you by doing nothing, you're going to be at about mid to upper 30s in that range, right?
Which
So
I think surprisingly is about the number that the trades talked about when we were first talking about this
I'm the only trade.
policy saying that, capacity wise, we'd be surprised if you got more than 35% on a whole job. And that was, there were the plumbers, your predecessor, Mike Tularski, was there. The carpenters were there. The trades council was present. They were all part of the committee and a lot of those discussions. So I think it's interesting, sort of the gut back then was almost what we're seeing in terms of data over the ensuing years.
I look at those numbers too. I'm looking at, because I usually like the electrical is like when you look at a whole project, there's a certain percentage usually all electrical. So when I see those 30%, I'm saying, okay, that's probably roughly electrician hours, I know I'm just on all these projects my guys are on. And I think we're only trade with local people on it most of the time.
in Matco,
I'm not kidding that I'll be like, Comfort Solutions.
Comfort Systems.
Yeah, it is.
Oh yeah, they're never local.
So remind me how you count
Speaking of-
these numbers, that these are people working on the job. It's not a day by day thing. It's either they're on the job or they're not. Is that the way it's done?
Month to month.
On a monthly basis?
Yeah. So the same person could repeat January, February, March, April.
Okay.
Same body. And if they're not local, they'll continue to be not local unless they move, I guess.
Some of those numbers might swell when you get rackers there, when you get, might fluctuate.
So that's another interesting thing that would be to look at timing.
Well, and with Loki Brill now, if they're doing weekly reporting, seeing the difference in laborers during that time on a weekly basis as opposed to monthly, if that'll change.
So there's a timing issue. So in the massive spreadsheet, I've got data first report, data last report. So could be with some work, could look at the swell from start to finish and where the other projects are coming in line at the same time. I mean, there's further analysis that could be done. with enough time. It's not as simple as clicking a box, but it could.
That's great information. It really is.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So.
What's working?
Yeah, what's working?
Yeah.
It does seem like we're getting useful information from this process. I think with Loki Brill, as you point out, we're going to see, far more granular week by week basis, which would probably give us better insight. It is interesting how that, as I said, that the local labor utilization seems to be focused on some contractors more than others. And having the discussion, feedback from contractors might give us some better insight into why that is. But it's an interesting question. If there's 200 contractors out there, why there's those 16 or so that are the big players? Maybe they're just, that's where they're focused. Certainly, there's a lot of contractors that say, I just do residential or whatever, that we won't see them on IDA projects, but that feedback should help us. Nels.
Otherwise, I think it'd be interesting to know which of the waiver categories are tapped most often, or, we're
Oh, yeah.
argument that it's either there's no local provider of that service, or whether it's the cost differential that is driving that waiver. Or is there, maybe there's a third category I'm missing, I don't know. But it seems like the specialized skills is one, like elevators.
There's 4 categories.
And then maybe there's, I'm just curious to know which ones are being claimed and approved. Yeah, I think.
Well, there's only been 7 waivers.
Yeah, I know.
No, I take that back.
I mean, over time, really, not on any one project.
Yeah.
I think it's too little amount to really get a sense on that. And the other question, just to throw it out there, is be curious to know, since you have the ability to look at Tompkins County, how many of the workers are Tompkins County residents at some point?
Whoa. I need John Guttridge. For that. Interesting. I didn't.
It's an analysis to see,
It's interesting. Yeah. I've never.
since you've got you're gonna have the area, rather than zip code analysis, you're gonna have it by county, right?
Yeah, we will have.
So
it.
we could look at 14850, like a couple of the zip codes, they sort of bleed. Like 14886 is T-Burg, but it also has Seneca County. So it's
Yeah.
imperfect, but I'm sure
I don't know if you have enough data to make useful of it yet. I mean, maybe that's.
We probably do with code writing on the backside to separate what county they live in. Based on the data we have going forward, they will be attributed to county.
Yeah, that's why I thought
Going forward, totally. This data set with some code writing, yeah, I could pluck that.
I'm more interested in going forward than.
Yeah, I like that. Because we will have that by.
Because the policy was evolving all this time.
Anything else? This is good. Good. We're learning.
Are you getting feedback that developers are reluctant to come to the IDA due to the 75% local labor? Standard?
Yeah, I certainly haven't heard anything that says it's too hard to deal with the IDA because of the 75% figure, which I was nervous about.
Yeah.
And certainly I thought the IDAs that said 100%, knowing that they were going to have waivers all over the place wasn't the right approach. But I thought 75 might be too high too, but it doesn't seem like it, but maybe I'm wrong.
We did have one developer, general contractor team that came in anticipating starting construction, but then the project has not started construction, but they wanted to, I think they really wanted to make sure they were crossing their Ts and dotting their Is. Went through the bid list with us, showed us where they were deficient, asked a lot of questions about, how to meet the requirements and whether some of the waivers would be administrative. They were very upfront about it, to make sure that they were going to be able to comply.
Mhm.
That project has not started construction yet. It's been put on hold.
But did they leave that meeting saying this won't work for us, or were they just saying, okay, now we understand it? Or has it been a factor, do you think, in the delay?
I wouldn't say that I've heard either way, but the factor in the delay is that they have $8 million in cost overruns that they need to close that gap before they can start construction. I mean, part of it is interest rates, but part of it is supply chain, and I would have to assume, but I don't know,
Yeah.
construction labor costs.
It might be useful to have that party come talk to us for a general overview.
Yeah, I would invite them with the developers.
Are they a local developer?
One of them, it's City Harbor. So it would be a team with Reedman and Edger are the ownership, the developers.
Okay.
And Reedman is out of Rochester and Edger's. Right.
Okay. Any further business to come before the Construction Labor Committee meeting for March 11th, 2025? Okay. A motion to adjourn. So move, seconded. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kelly, together.
You could escape. It should. I'm trying to find.
Big difference in that, those, tell my councilman, everybody yelling.
Yeah. Better work collaboratively, right?
Oh, my.
I was just in the meeting with Greg yesterday too, so see a lot of overlap here.
I
But
couldn't get over all
Those-
those.
yeah,
I think
a
I'm
little different now, but
Holy cow. Not the Zoom, but.
Find a little bit.
The one with the stairs, that was,
Park Grove.
Yeah.
12.
Where are they out of?
no, I know what you mean. I had to go change the wording afterwards. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to hit all the snow out there too. I remember.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it's good that they did this. Some local.
Yeah.
No, thanks for coming.
Yeah, sure.
Seeing it better than.
I didn't wear a jacket today.
Well, I didn't know. I had to ride my bike at 8 in the morning.
Okay.
That's different.
Have a good day now.